Hi there, how are you doing? In this video, we'll talk about how to create a user in an Oracle database instance and then how to connect to the database using the specified user. So it won't take much time as we are only trying to create the user instead of trying to install the database. In my case, I already have the database installed and it is up and running, and hence I don't need to explain it. But eventually, I will try to create a dedicated video detailing what are the different steps that are involved to download Oracle database from Oracle website and then to install it on your local machine in case if you want to practice it, right? So let's try to create the user, but before we try to create the user, we need to check whether the database is up and running or not and what are different properties that needs to be used to connect to the database, right? And in this video, we will also talk about like how to grant the privileges on a table space to a user and how much of space can be retained from a table space, and we will also try to check what table space has been assigned to what schema or to the table and what is the size of table and all. But this is just on a high level so that you're familiar how to check the table space associated to a schema to a user to an account, right? So in this case, I'm using DBeaver as one of my GUI graphical user interface. Of course, there are several GUIs that are available in the market, like SQL Developer, which is widely used and it's a freeware. You can download it from Oracle and you can always use it. And we have Toad, which is a commercial, enterprise scale IDE. And then we have DBeaver, as I'm showing. Likewise, there are several other IDE tools that are available in the market, right? So to check the status of my database, if it is up and running, so I will go to the command prompt and then I will search for Oracle database first. So SE query and then Oracle, and I can see there is a service with name Oracle service for RCL, and then SE find RCL. There are several instances. I mean, there are services that are up and I'll just clear it, and then this is a command ctl listener control, and then I'll say status, which will display the health of my service and the database if it is still up and running, right? So in this case, the database is up and running and the instance name is warcl and it is running on my local host and the port is 1521. These are the details that I need in case if I want to connect to the database from any of the IDE, right? So what I'll do here is I have SQL Plus installed on this machine, so I'll just use SQL Plus and it will prompt me to enter the username. In this case, I'll use this as this DBA. Ideally, real life projects, except the DBAs, no one else will have the access to log in with the sys user. However, because this is my local instance, I'm logging in with the sys user, which doesn't have any privileges in case if I want to create the users or drop the users or assign the table spaces or the table size, whatnot. So sys DBA, I'm logging in with. I just cleared my screen. Now I'll try to create a user. So grant connect comma resource to sales. So in this case, sales is my username, or I'll just make it as sales underscore user identified by. I want to use a default password get shipped along with the sales user identified by Tiger. And then if I just enter as we can see, the grant succeeded. In this case, we have granted connect privileges and then resource privileges to a new user that is getting created, which is sales user, and then I'm setting the password as Tiger. So let's see if we can connect with this user, right? So if I want to connect from SQL Plus itself, I can just specify con and then the user what I want to use. So I'll say that sales underscore user. Ideally, with this user to be able to log in right now, and it is asking for password. I'll just hit Tiger and we can see now it is connected. So how do you check what user am I logged in? Let's say that I have cleared it. Now I don't know what user I have logged in. So I can say that show user And as we can see, user is sales underscore user. This is the user I have logged in right now. Earlier I have logged in with sys user, but now I have logged in with sales underscore user, right? However, now let me try to create a table within this user. I'll just say that test of ID1 number. We'll talk more about this in the next video, and then I'll enter. So table has been created. Insert into test value. And now if you see no privilege on table space users, what does it mean? So I just have created, if you see here, I have created the user sales underscore user, but I did not grant the table space in which the data has to be stored of any table that gets created under sales underscore user schema, right? So I have to grant the table space first place and the quota. In this case, what I'll do is altered user sales underscore user, and then I'll say quota unlimited on use. Okay, because I have logged in with sales user, which doesn't have the system admin connecting the database and then creating any tables from schema, it is throwing an error that insufficient privilege. So let me switch. Now I have connected to the sysdb, and now I can run this. I'm able to grant the table space which is users, and I also specified quota unlimited, which means that there is no restriction how much of space can be consumed from table space users in this case, right? So now let's connect to the sales underscore user again, and then insert into test values of one. This is just for an example. As we can see, the data has been inserted successfully. So this is one way of creating the user. Connect sysdba, and then drop user sales underscore. And in case if there are any objects that are created within the schema, it is saying that like we should specify cascade. Let's do it. And now, so I'm still connected with sys, and now let me try to log in with sales underscore user. Now it will throw an error, invalid username and password, login denied. That means that this particular user doesn't exist any longer. And let me check if I'm still connected with sys user. So show user, and if we check it right now, there is no user that is connected with, because I tried to change my connection from sys user to sales user. So which means that it has exited the sys user, and then it is trying to make a connection with the sales user, but because the sales user doesn't exist, it has exited, and now I'm not connected with any user. So I'll try to connect with sys once again, and I'll say create user sales underscore user identified by tiger. In this case, I have created the user and I have set the password as tiger. And then I'll say that grant connect comma resource to sales underscore user. So now I have given the privileges to this user sales underscore user to connect to the database and then to create any objects underneath its schema. And then I will also run altered user sales underscore user quota unlimited on users. So in this case, users is the table space name, and then I can connect with sales and tiger. Now I can create a table. First, let's check what is the user it is showing. So we can see it is sales user. Create table test of ID1 number, and then I can also insert. So if I just do select start from test, I can see the data as well, right? So this is how we connect to the database after creating a user. However, if you see nowhere I have specified to which database it has to connect. Because this is my local instance and uh, it is able to connect to the database directly. However, in the real world projects, the users like us who are the developers will be logging in from their own machines, and the database is installed on the server, which means that we'll not be able to connect to the database just like this. We'll have to specify entries. The TNS entries are nothing but the description to specify where the database is running and then what port has to be used, what is the service name has to be used. For that, we can give an alias, and using that alias, when we say that connect user at the rate the alias, it will pick up all the further properties that are stored within the TNS file, and then it will attempt to make a connection to the database. So this is one way of doing it. However, if I go to the dbeaver, and here I'll go to connections, and then I'll say create new connection, and here it will ask me what database technology am I trying to connect. In this case, I'm trying to connect to the Oracle database technology, and then what is my host. So if you're working on a project, you can always ask the DBA. They will be able to help you with the host name. But in my case, because it is localhost, I can just use localhost, or it is 127.0.0.1. And my port is default, which is 1521. That's what the port always gets shipped with the Oracle database by default. However, if we want to change it, we can always change it. And then the database name is ORCL. This is how I have configured the name of my database. And here, if we look at it, has the username. I'll change it to sales underscore user. And then the password, I'll say tiger123. And if I hit test connection, we can see that this is connected, and I can click on finish. So this is the new connection that I made, so that there is no confusion. I can go here and then I can select sales user. And now, so let's see if we can still use the previous. And if you see, it says invalid SQL statement, because this kind of commands cannot be executed from IDEs, especially Toad and DBeavers, but SQL developer, they can be executed from SQL plus command prompt, but not from the IDEs technically. So then how do I check what user did I log in with? So I can use select user from dual, and if I run it, now I can see here sales user. That means I have logged into the database using sales user, right? So now how do I check what is the table has been assigned to the user sales underscore user, or to the schema called sales underscore user, right? So what we can do is we can go to the something. Okay, so because I have logged in with sales user, which doesn't have the access to these dictionary tables, db underscore table space or db underscore data files, these are dictionary tables to which we did not grant the access to sales underscore user. I am getting an error. Let me change my connection and then we can check it. So I'll change it to RCL. So these are different table spaces that are available. In this case, users is one of the table space. And if I just go query this db underscore table data files, I will be able to see what is the data file name that has been assigned to the table space users, and what is the location where exactly has it been created. If I just run it, and here if we look at, so my table space name is users, and this is the location where my data file has been created. And you'll see the size of the data file in the form of bytes or in the form of blocks. So typically, the data file size, to what extent it can grow, is also dependent on the block size. In my case, I have given it as default, which means that each block size is of 8 KB. So that means it can grow up to 32 GB. 32 gigabytes is the maximum size my user stable space can grow. And if I still want to use the same user stable space, then I will have to create a new data file and then use the same one to associate to the user stable space. Now, how do we check what is the table space name that has been assigned to the sales underscore user? So we can go to the and let me actually query the specific username. And in this case, if you see default table space, which is this is where any table that we create within sales underscore user schema, all those tables will get stored within the user's table space. And in fact, this is what we spoke about in our previous session. What are the different layers that are involved? And part of those things I mentioned, like what is table space and how the table space is mapped to the database file, where the database file is stored, right? So this is how we can check for what user what table space has been assigned, and for what table space what database file has been assigned, and the location where the database file has been created. So that's all about uh, creating a user connecting to the database. In our next session, we'll try to understand more about, like if you see here, uh, we have db underscore table spaces, which is a dictionary table, and then db underscore data files, which is another dictionary table, and then we have db underscore users at another dictionary table. So I have used three dictionary tables so far. Likewise, we'll have to use several data tables as we go start learning more about creating the tables, adding the columns, inserting the data and all. However, every time we do something, we will also want to check what is the metadata, and the metadata is always stored in the dictionary tables. Hence, in our next session, we'll learn more about dictionary tables before we delve detail into how to create a table and how to specify the parameters, how to check what parameters or properties have been specified while creating a table. And feel free to post your questions in the comment box. In